We've got a lot to discuss with David Closson, our weekly Biblical Worldview segment leader. He'll be joining me, but here's some of the things that I want to talk with him about. Democrats are still reeling, really, from a major decision by the U.S. Supreme Court. It's a landmark decision, and the vote was 6-3, took place earlier this week, but they had upheld Tennessee's law prohibiting experimental gender procedures on minors. This is a huge case. And I don't know, maybe to some extent, some of the shock is now beginning to wear off some of the Democrats, but they are now plotting a path forward into how to push their destructive message in the midst of a world where, at least here in the United States, Tennessee and at least 20 other states can now legally protect children from the permanent harms of so-called gender transition procedures. Huge, significant decision this was. And I want to start with that topic, and we'll move from there. Joining me now, Family Research Council's director at the Center for Biblical Worldview, David Closson. He's also the author of the book Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. David, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always good to have you on Friday, my friend.
Hey, great to be with you as well, Jody. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, I do want to get to some of the life issues as we go down through some of this. But the Supreme Court, this decision protecting minors in Tennessee and beyond, I think this is huge. In my mind, Tennessee was just trying to protect minors from puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and all sorts of stuff. Break this down for us, David. Why was this such a significant victory, both from a legal perspective, but also morally? Why is this such a big decision?
Yeah, Jody, unbelievable precedent-setting decision, one that I am profoundly grateful, and I think Christians, millions of Christians all over this country ought to be profoundly grateful for this as well. This is the Skrmetti case. Interesting, I actually got to meet the Attorney General last week at the Southern Baptist Convention. Attorney General Jonathan Skrmetti, incredibly gracious, kind, loving man. And the way you described this case, Jody, is exactly how the Attorney General himself would. The Tennessee, their law that was originally passed in 2023, known as SB 1, was designed to protect minor children from these medical interventions. These are children who are struggling with gender dysphoria, and it would protect them from getting things like puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and even physical irreversible surgeries. And what happened just a couple of days ago at the Supreme Court was a 6-3 decision. Chief Justice John Roberts wrote it. And what was incredible about this is he, from just a legal perspective, he rejected the claim that Tennessee's law constituted sex-based or transgender-based discrimination, and simply said that this law was a neutral regulation based on age and medical context. He said that the law's rationale was plausible, that states can decide how to regulate these novel and uncertain medical treatments for minors. And what's also really helpful, sometimes I just love doing this when I look at a Supreme Court ruling, is to read the concurrences. And Jody, this tells you where kind of the rest of the court is. Justice Barrett, Alito, and Thomas wrote significant concurrences that kind of help us see exactly where the court is on this issue. Just for the sake of time, let me just read one line from Justice Thomas's concurrence that I think is just it's a breath of fresh air. I've lived here, in D.C. for 6 years, and this is one of the neatest things I've read in an opinion. Justice Clarence Thomas said this: "In politically contentious debates over matters shrouded in scientific uncertainty, courts should not assume that self-described experts are correct. They have built their medical determination on conceitedly weak evidence, and they have serendipitously compromised their medical recommendations to achieve political ends." Talk about some moral clarity from Justice Thomas. So again, I think this is a victory for common sense. It's a victory for the created order. And what this means practically, Jody, is that the 27 states that have similar laws on the books can now enforce those. Big win for children.
Wow, that really is. And you brought up the science. It seems to me, and I say this largely because of what we're seeing in Europe and other places of the world, but increasing evidence of harm from these so-called gender-affirming care procedures, especially as it relates to vulnerable children. So how should Christians here in America, how should we think about the role of government in protecting children from these type of procedures?
Yeah. Jody, I think we need to be clear what we're talking about here. The left will actually use such a Orwellian language, gender-affirming care. That's the language you'll see on newspapers and websites that are kind of commenting on this gender-affirming care. Let's be clear what these medical interventions are. Again, cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and physical surgeries. These cause permanent harm. For example, many of these things will cause permanent sterilization. They will cause a loss of bone density. The emotional trauma that many of these children go through is also very, very real. And so I think as Christians, we need to be the people who are bold, who are full of just clear-eyed and courageous on this. In the name of gender-affirming care, what we've actually seen is harmful ideologies pushed on minor children. Again, this is not about hatred, as the left is going to argue. This is about safeguarding the most innocent and vulnerable that we have amongst us, which are our children. And of course, as Christians, we believe that everyone is made in God's image, has value and dignity, and the way God created you is exactly how you were supposed to be created.
And yet, just as you said, the critics on the other side are going to look to you and me and others like us and say that we are hateful, that we are opposed to science, when in reality, science justifies everything we're talking about right now. But my question is, how can Christians respond to these critics clearly, compassionately, full of grace and truth and protecting children, all of that kind of wrapped up at the same time?
Biology is not bigotry. And I think as Christians, we need to be really, really clear. Ephesians 4:15 is kind of my go-to verse for my political theology and for how I engage in politics. That's where Paul talks about the importance of truth and love. That's how we're to engage. And again, we just need to be the people that are really, really clear. Protecting children from harmful medical interventions is actually not hateful. It is loving. We need to also be the people that look and understand those who suffer from gender dysphoria, which is acute. Those who deal with this, adults and children, talk about how just disorienting it can be. But we need to be clear-eyed. 85+% of minor children who experience some confusion about their gender at a young age, they grow out of it. And so again, we are the people that believe in real medicine and real science. And because a minor child is confused, we're not going to then rush to affirm that confusion by altering their body, by pumping them full of hormones. We want to be those full of compassion who can lead them out of that confusion, not come along and affirm that confusion. Again, truth and love, Jody, but we need to again say biology is not bigotry.
Great statement there. All right, before I move to another topic, I introduced coming into this segment talking about the Lift Up Life Day prayer and fasting, on this battle of life that continues, and you've got your book that I, of course, want to continue to plug, Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. David, how important is it that we stay engaged on this fight for life, and particularly as we're coming into next week with a national day set aside for prayer and fasting?
Jody, it's of crucial importance. This is an issue that is on the very heart of God. I did an interview earlier today. We were talking about a host of issues, and the life issue came up. And I just made the point, there are issues that those of us who go to church, we can agree to disagree on. There are different strategies and issues that we can look at and come out on different sides. Life's not one of them. The issue of abortion is really clearly addressed in Scripture. We have God's revealed truth. We have Psalm 139, verses 13 through 16, Luke chapter 1, verse 39 through 45. There is a thus saith the Lord. God is really, really clear on this. And if God's clear, we ought to be clear too. And I think, next week we should celebrate God's gracious gift and kindness and mercy to us and the overturning of Roe v. Wade that had reigned for 49 years and had coarsened the moral conscience of this nation. But there's so much more work to be done. Think about chemical abortion and other issues that we're still on the front lines fighting. So I think next week on the 24th, we ought to be those who are grateful to the Lord. How ungrateful it would be to not thank Him for this good gift. But we know that there's so much more work to still be done.
Absolutely. And again, I just encourage people, you want more info on that, text the word pray to 67742. All right, David, if I can switch gears on you now, let's jump overseas. There's still so much tension between Israel and Iran. All of the fighting is escalating significantly. And you've got some great points on the principles, particularly biblical Christian principles, as it relates to war, just war theory. Can you kind of elaborate some on that? What is a righteous response, if we can put it that way, that one might want to look at this type of conflict that's taking place in Israel?
Yeah, the framework that Christians have honestly used for centuries, going back to Augustine, is called just war theory. This helps us to evaluate when a conflict, it's just to enter a conflict, and then actually the rules of engagement as well. War is always tragic, Jody, and I think we need to start there. War is always tragic. But a couple of kind of criteria that Christians have used would be just cause. So self-defense would be an example of a cause. A war can be just if it's waged by a legitimate authority, if there's right intention, and if there's proportionality. And looking at the situation with Israel, I think obviously Israel is a legitimate authority as a nation state, and they do have the right and responsibility to protect their people. And since 1979, Iran has been calling for their destruction. And intelligence experts that I've watched this past week and a half have said Iran was really, really close to getting the nuclear, the uranium enrichment that they needed for a nuclear weapon. And Israel acted on that intelligence. That it's an existential threat if Iran actually has the capability of delivering a nuclear weapon. And so I think the principles of just war, at least for the sake of Israel, make it really clear that they have to protect their people. They have just cause. And so again, I think Christians should be praying for the Israeli people, for the prime minister, and we need to also be praying for our president over these next 2 years. Over the next 2 weeks, as President Trump also weighs potential American involvement.
Yeah, I agree. And let's also pray for the people of Iran. Yep. Yesterday we had Dr. Harmoz Shariat on with us, who heads up the Iran Alive Ministries. And there's a lot of people in Iran who are not at all associated with the tyrannical government there that we need to be in prayer for as well. All right, real quickly, our time is slipping away from us, David. But while we're overseas, some more life news coming out of the UK as they basically have legalized abortion up until birth. They voted on that. How should Christians be praying and responding to that? And what does this say about this issue in the West here?
Yeah, Jody, this is a morally catastrophic and heartbreaking decision. Essentially, over there in England, they have a law in the books going back to 1861 that protects life. Now, subsequent legislation has allowed abortion really pretty late into a pregnancy, up to 24 weeks. And the decision they've made now is to simply decriminalize it. So that law is still on the books, but it's no longer criminalized. And Jody, again, this is just representative of the moral and spiritual decline of Europe, at large, but specifically England. I think it's clear to say that England is running on the final fumes of their Christian heritage. And all I can say, Jody, is when a society begins to celebrate what God calls evil, whether that's abortion, gender ideology, you can kind of go down the list. You go on a Romans 1 trajectory, exchanging truth for a lie. So Christians just need to speak clearly to this in England. We need to preach the truth. We need to testify to God's truth, and we need to remain faithful. But we need to be praying for our brothers and sisters overseas, because this is morally catastrophic what's happening.
And I think it's a clarion call for the church here in the United States and around the world to step up to the plate with biblical truth and to be a prophetic voice of truth in the midst of darkness that is sweeping all around us. David Closson, Director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at FRC. Always great to have you on Fridays. Thank you so much. Hope you have a great weekend.